It was time to make it right. Taco Bell was a short walk from my house. Not many people lived near the mall, but rent was cheap. Every night I would go there and order the same thing, a burrito and a large drink. It was my excuse for dieting. I was always happy with this meal because it cost less than $3, which meant I could save more money. For the past 6 years, I've been saving up all the money I could. I had one goal, to buy a wife. I didn't care where she came from or what she looked like. What mattered was that she lived with me and shared my life. If I was lucky, she might even like me. I never considered love as an option. I had always liked children, and I had always wanted children of my own. That was the only requirement I planned to list on my application. The woman I ended up getting involved with had to be willing and able to have children. I unwrapped a bean and beef burrito. My hands were huge, rough. They were perfect for preparing the hot, juicy delicacy that was my dinner. I worked with heavy equipment all day long, and even when I put on gloves, they still looked like big chunks of meat by the end of the day. That was my job. I loved it, and it paid me well. 2 tables away from me sat a boy about 6 years old. His whole family was busy talking and eating Mexican delicacies, and he was just taking bites and watching me. He watched me bring this monstrosity to my mouth and take a crunchy bite. Soy juice dripped down my chin. To him, I was adorable. I wiped my chin and smiled at him. When he smiled back, I felt happy. I finished my dinner and headed for the door. The boy kept his eyes on me. As I walked out, I smiled again. The kids liked me, but the adults, especially the female ones, seemed to find me repulsive. As I walked past the building, I glanced at my reflection in the windows. I was indeed an impressive sight. I was over 180 centimeters tall, and my hair was cut short. If it had been any shorter, I would have gone bald. I had a wide, flat face with a big mouth. I wasn't the kind of guy that girls dream about when they go to bed at night. I had graduated high school, but I had never gone on a date, not even to prom. I think it was partly my fault, because I never asked a girl to go on a date with me. I was conditioned by the preconceived rejections I constantly carried around. It was sad, but I was okay with it. In another 2 years, I would have enough money to buy something for my wife. Tonight, I could sit down at the computer and do some more shopping. Right now, I had enough money to find a girl in a few places, but I was hoping that if I spent more, I'd buy better merchandise. It was a sad way to think about a wife, but a guy like me didn't have many options. It was only a 5-minute walk to the house. It was a small 2-bedroom bungalow. It didn't look too big, but it was furnished and the utilities were cheap. There was a kitchen in the house, but I never used it. I didn't even have any dishes or cooking utensils. But I did have a refrigerator with cold drinks. At night, the stores in the mall were empty. It was a little creepy, but at the same time cool. Every once in a while, as I walked by, I would scare off a cat or an errant dog. Tonight was a little different. There were 3 of them, and they seemed to be having a hell of a good time kicking the shit out of someone lying on the ground. I didn't know if this guy deserved a whipping or not, but I didn't like the odds. All I said as I approached them was, "Hi!" All 3 of them stopped and turned to me. I got the distinct feeling that I had just screwed up big time. I was big, but not tough. I always avoided fights, but looking back, I realized there weren't many. No one picked on me just because of my height and unsightly appearance. These guys, however, were not impressed. I quickly decided that now was not the time to be a nice guy. The first of them didn't stand a chance. I struck him with a straight right-hand overhand punch. To my surprise, he just fell to the ground. The other 2 got close enough to land a few blows that didn't seem to affect me at all. I felt them, but I didn't feel much pain or discomfort. I hit thug number 2 backwards with the same right hand, and then picked up the 3rd guy and tossed him into the nearest dumpster. The poor guy who was being beaten sat there and watched. He didn't look very good, but he was still attentive. I helped him to his feet and into a Mercedes parked in the middle of the alley. I'd never driven a car before, but he'd better get to the hospital. It took about 10 minutes to find a 24-hour clinic. He didn't say a word, just looked at me with eyes of affection. I may have been ugly, but this guy was scruffy. His olive skin glistened with sweat and blood running down his face. One cheek seemed swollen, as did his lower lip. His lips were thin and tightly compressed. I stayed with him just long enough to make sure he was taken care of, and then caught a cab and went to my house. My first Good Samaritan experience cost me $15. 4 days later, I read in the paper that the bodies of 3 men had been found in the same alley. All of them had been killed by a single shot to the back of the head. For some reason, I didn't think it was a coincidence. Although I preferred Taco Bell for dinner, I always went to the Waffle House for breakfast. I was a man of habit and ate the same portion of pancakes and glazed eggs every day. I never had to place an order unless a new waitress came in. The girls would usually put a piece of bacon or sausage on my plate because they knew they would get a good tip for it. It was a joke between us and one of the few real interactions I had with people at all. I once considered asking one of them out on a date, but chickened out. For 3 months, my life went back to normal, and then everything changed again. The caress from the alley came back into my life. Mr. Trent? Robert Trent? He was standing on the landing with a smile on his face. I guessed he was trying to sound pleasant, but it sounded kind of sinister. Yeah, most people call me Bobby. Can I come in? We need to talk for a few minutes. He wasn't alone. Behind him stood a small, creepy-looking goth girl. She was less than 6 feet tall and looked sickly. I stepped aside, and they both entered. He sat down on the couch, and she stood next to him and slightly behind him. You know who I am, don't you, Bobby? Yes. You're the guy I took to the hospital a few months ago. My name's Maurice Franklin. What can I do for you, Mr. Franklin? I need help, Bobby. I need to get out of the county for a few years, and I'd like you to take care of Topaz for me. What's a topaz? Maurice looked over his right shoulder and nodded. That's Topaz. She's my favorite Saba. I'll be in Amsterdam for about 7 years, and I can't believe I'm leaving her with someone else. You don't even know me. I've only met you once, and that was under rather unusual circumstances. I've studied you very carefully, and I feel that Topaz will be safe with you. I don't think so. While I'm away, I'll pay you $2,000 a month for her upkeep. All I'm asking you to do is keep her safe. I have a job to do, Mr. Franklin. I can't watch her every minute. What's to stop her from just leaving when I'm not home? She obeys, Mr. Trent. She'll obey your every word. If you tell her to stay, she'll stay and ask no questions. He called me by my last name. I think it was to emphasize what he wanted to say. You mean like a Stepford wife? Not exactly like that, but close to it. What do you mean she'll obey my every word? Topaz will cook for you and clean your house. She will also share your bed if you want her to. She's been programmed since she was a baby and can't refuse you anything. To you? Maybe. But not to me. She'll do it if I tell her to. Mr. Franklin and I talked for another half hour. Topaz stood quietly the whole time, not saying a word or expressing any emotion. Before he left, he stood in front of the little girl and spoke quite distinctly and expressively. Mr. Trent is your new master. You will do everything he asks of you without question. Do you understand me? Yes. That was the first and only word that came out of her mouth. As he left, I noticed a small bag by the front door. I could only assume it contained everything she owned in this world. The only thing that was even more regrettable was the girl herself. I grabbed her bag and headed down the small hallway to the adjoining bedroom. She followed me like a puppy following a doggy. When I showed her where the bathroom was, she smiled slightly at me and went straight to the bathroom. I felt like she hadn't gone to the bathroom all day. I assumed that when I showed it to her, she took it as permission to use it. Mr. Franklin left me a check for $2,000, but no phone number or contact address. It looked like I was in a desperate situation. There was no food in the house. In order to feed her, I had to take her out with me. I had lunch when I was at work, so she had to skip that meal. That didn't work. I had to make some adjustments. It was time for dinner, and she followed me to Taco Bell. I asked what she wanted, and she just looked at me. I got my usual dish, and she got 2 soft chicken tacos with a small drink. It was an interesting dinner because for the first time more people were looking at her than me. It was easy to see why. Topaz had straight black hair with a pink streak down the side. Dark eyeshadow and purple lipstick gave her a very strange look. I guess to some people she would be attractive, but not to most. In addition to the numerous piercings in her ears, she had silver or metal nails in her eyebrows, nose, and lower lip. One on her tongue was not as noticeable. Although I understood why, I was annoyed by the comments whispered by many visitors. For some strange reason, I was beginning to feel somewhat protective of my new charge. On the way home, I tried to find out more about her. "How old are you?" "I have a birth certificate that says I'm 18, but I'm not sure that's true." "Why is that?" "It says my name is Madison Hart. I don't know that name." "How long have you been working with Mr. Franklin?" I'm not sure. 4 or 5 years, I think." "How did you meet him?" "I didn't meet him. He bought me. I had a lot of questions. Maurice Franklin bought this young girl the same way I was going to buy a wife. Suddenly I felt as scummy as he did. I didn't ask her any more questions. Back home, I called my boss at work and took a week's vacation. I had a big vacation ahead of me, and I had a lot to do." Topaz seemed extremely pleased when I told her that she could use the toilet and bathroom whenever she wanted. Apparently, it was common practice to control such things. I told her she could take a shower, and she immediately began undressing in front of me. In a normal situation, I would have turned and walked away, but in this case, it was her body that caught my attention. She had scars and bruises all over her body. Many of the scars were from cigarette or cigar burns. Her back was covered with lash marks. I was confused by the whole situation. I realized it had to do with a culture I was unfamiliar with. There was more metal jewelry. In addition to the 2 breast rings, there was one in her navel. I didn't own her, but she was going to be with me for 7 years. I had a decision to make, and I made it. Topaz stepped out of the shower and joined me in the living room. She wasn't wearing anything. The initial shock at the state of her body had passed, and I now realized that I was alone with a naked girl. She was young and petite and had a beautiful body despite her flaws. I quickly realized that she was naked on purpose, probably because, in her mind, that's what I wanted. She was not ashamed of her body and seemed comfortable in my presence. I left the room and returned with a large beach towel. She seemed embarrassed when I insisted she cover herself. Heck, I embarrassed myself. I could have watched her all night, but somehow I felt dirty and guilty. It was still early evening, but I needed a break. I walked her into the bedroom and closed the door. She looked disappointed, but I couldn't tell if she was afraid she had done something wrong or if she was displeased because I didn't want to make love to her. I did want to sleep with her, but not under the current circumstances. I was looking forward to the first morning with my new guest. If she was going to be with me for 7 years, something needed to change. I walked into the kitchen and she was standing by the table waiting. I didn't know how long she had been there. There was nothing we could do in the kitchen because it was empty. I headed for the door and Topaz immediately followed me. She followed me all the way to the Waffle House. We didn't utter a word. Today I took a separate seat from my usual one behind the counter. Glenda worked behind the counter and brought water and coffee for both of us. She looked at me questioningly and seemed to be waiting for some kind of answer or explanation. I didn't know what to say. "I'll have my usual breakfast and bring a Western omelet for the lady." Glenda made a strange grimace when I used the word lady in reference to Topaz. It was crowded behind the counter and we caught glances from the staff and other customers. My breakfast was as I ordered, but there was no extra meat on my plate today. Topaz ate it all without saying a word. When we left, I left a larger than usual tip on the table. Glenda and the other girls might have felt a little awkward in the presence of my guest, but the large tip was to show them that I understood. I didn't mind people staring at me and making quiet remarks, but I didn't like it when they did the same to Topaz. On the way back home, I made my first big decision. Topaz never sat down unless she was ordered to, even in a restaurant. She never spoke unless she was asked to or needed clarification. I told her to sit at the kitchen table and sat down across from her. "I am your master. Is that correct?" "Yes, master." "You must do whatever I tell you to do. Is that correct?" "Yes, master." "From now on, your name will be Madison. Do you understand?" "Yes, master. My name is Madison." I didn't like this game, but I didn't know how else to do what I wanted to do. I didn't have any grand plans for her, but something had to be done. Now that the name problem was solved, I offered her her first assignment. I slid a pair of needle-nose pliers, a tube of Neosporin, and a small container of Tupperware across the table to her. She looked at them and then at me. "Madison, go to your room and take off all your clothes. I want you to take off all the metal studs and piercings you have, every single one of them. Put them in a plastic container and then take a shower. After you're clean, apply a small amount of ointment from this tube to each of your empty holes. You don't have to do this with whatever is on your tongue. When you're done, get dressed and come back." "Oh, yeah." "Madison, no makeup, please." I don't know why I added please. It was probably out of habit. I'm not a drinker, but I had a beer while I waited for her. I thought I heard her make a few quiet noises that sounded like, "Oops." But I was probably wrong. She was supposed to be more resistant than that. The beer warmed up before I even finished it. Like I said, I'm not a big drinker. When she came back into the kitchen, she looked the same as before, but changed at the same time, if that makes sense. She handed me the pliers and ointment. I handed the ointment back to her and told her to use it if she got any sore spots. The trip to Walmart promised to be expensive, but I didn't care. We took 2 shopping carts. At the home goods store, we bought dishes, silverware, pots and pans, a toaster, and a small microwave. In the health and beauty department, we bought all the grooming supplies that I felt were necessary. She helped me pick out soap, toothpaste, and feminine care products without my help. It was a relief to me that she had anticipated what I wanted from her. When we walked into the hair color department, things slowed down a bit. I asked her which packaging was closest to her natural color. She seemed a little confused, but finally pointed to a box that had a picture of a girl with brown hair on it. She looked at the box and smiled before putting it in the cart. When we got to the women's department, I found a female employee and asked for her help. I told the saleswoman that Madison needed 6 sports bras and a dozen pairs of cotton underwear. I wanted it to be practical, not sexy, and felt it was important to communicate my desires. We also bought socks, slacks, blouses, and a light jacket before heading to the shoe department. I had planned to buy her 2 pairs, but ended up picking up 3. When we headed to the grocery department, the first cart was full. I was completely confused. Like a normal man, all I could think about was steaks and hot dogs. Madison noticed my hesitation and touched my arm. "Robert?" I didn't expect her to speak. "Yeah? You wanted to buy a coffee pot?" Of course I wanted to buy a coffee pot, but I didn't think about it while I was in the appliance department. I just looked at her and nodded affirmatively. "You go get the coffee pot and I'll get the food." Wow. That was a relief. I wasn't going to go grocery shopping. She took the empty cart and headed for the meat department while I tried to find the coffee pots. 15 minutes later, I stopped. What the hell was I doing? I left her alone and went to wander around the store. She could have just walked away and I'd never be able to find her again. God, I was as stupid as I looked. I grabbed the cheapest coffee maker they had and rushed back to the grocery section. I couldn't see her. I walked up and down the aisles, but she was nowhere to be seen. "Robert, I'm ready. Did you bring the coffee pot?" She was right behind me. The cart was half filled with groceries. She smiled, noticing that I was happy to see her. I don't think she realized why I was glad to see her. The total for everything came to over $200. I had the money, but I decided to use my credit card. I didn't have many opportunities to use it. On the way home, Madison was smiling. I thought I heard her humming something to herself, but maybe I was wrong. I tend to imagine good things because it brightens my life. First, we laid out the groceries. I asked her to choose where she wanted to place things. She was a little hesitant at first, but quickly got the hang of it. She watched me from the kitchen while I carried her new clothes into the bedroom. The bags took up most of the single bed. There was a small linen closet in the bathroom. I stacked all the new toiletries and personal items on one shelf. I also cleared out a shelf in the medicine cabinet for her. I left the box of hair dye on the sink. When I returned, she was standing in the kitchen. She wasn't doing anything but just standing there. It annoyed me. I wasn't too upset about a lot of things. I had to do something so she wouldn't be so subservient. I was fine with her being my companion, but I didn't want her to be a zombie. I told her to go to her bedroom and try on all her new clothes to make sure they fit her. There was an empty dresser in the room and a few hangers in the closet. She smiled as she walked out to open her purchases. She already knew what was in there, but she still seemed eager to take another look at them. I decided to figure out how to use the new coffee pot. I made a mess of it on the first try, but it worked out pretty well on the second. I was enjoying my culinary skills making coffee when Madison came back into the kitchen. She was wearing jeans, an orange t-shirt, and white tennis shoes. She was cute. She smiled when she saw me smiling. I was still drinking my wonderful brew when she sprinted back into the bedroom. Maybe it wasn't really a hop, but her gait was bouncy. I called the human resources lady at work and asked what I needed to do to get Madison on my insurance. After 10 minutes of confusing chatter, I thanked her and hung up. I didn't know what came over me, but I felt myself starting to feel responsible for her. She hadn't been with me for a full day yet, but I had already grown attached to her. I had matured and become vulnerable. Maybe I should slow down. Madison was busy in the bedroom. I stepped out of the house to contemplate my new situation. A day ago, I was a lonely, depressed loser trying to find a way to buy a wife. Today, I was responsible for the cocky little wench that had been foisted upon me. I had no idea what I was going to do with her for the rest of the week, let alone 7 years. I didn't even know if it was legal for me to keep her. It was like she was a pet and not a person. None of my life experiences had prepared me for what was happening. Hell, I was confused. I got gas in the car and then bought 2 Subway sandwiches before heading home. I liked their sandwiches, but the bread was disgusting. I always wished someone at the company would improve the quality of the bread. Madison seemed relieved when I got home. I got the feeling that she was a little alarmed when she noticed I was gone. It didn't seem to fit her nature, or what I thought her nature should be. She was a submissive. She wasn't supposed to show any emotion. Hell, what did I know? I wasn't even sure what a submissive was, and I definitely didn't know what to do with her. For lunch, we had 2 cans of soda and some chips. It was nice to eat at home, and it was nice to have someone to talk to, even though she hardly talked. After dinner, she put the dishes away and I sat down to watch TV. I wasn't used to having free time during the week and didn't know what to do to keep myself occupied. Madison didn't seem to know what to occupy herself with either, so I just looked toward the back of the house and nodded. She quietly left the room. I wasn't a regular on TV shows, so I switched channels. I was surprised to see a picture of Maurice Franklin on the screen. He was wanted by the FBI and several other local and federal agencies. It turned out that Mr. Franklin was not only ugly to look at, but a disgusting person. Most of what they talked about was beyond me, as I didn't understand when they discussed his involvement with the 3 dead guys they found in the alley. I thought it was funny that they didn't know where he was, but I did. Then I realized that he had probably lied to me. Because of my gullibility, it was easy to do. 10 minutes later, I was completely engrossed in the Steven Seagal movie. I fell asleep before the end of the movie and woke up to the familiar smell of a bean burrito. Madison had made dinner herself. A frozen burrito is no substitute for the real thing, but I appreciated her effort. She served it with corn chips and Pepsi-Cola. I smiled at her effort, and she smiled back. It was easy to make her happy. What I liked was that she seemed to feel comfortable around me. I was just finishing eating when I noticed that her hair had turned a light brown instead of shiny black. She looked cute. I caught myself thinking how good she would look if she were 15 centimeters taller and 20 pounds heavier. I immediately felt guilty for not being grateful for what I had. That night, she sat on the couch with me and we watched old tedious sitcoms. We didn't talk at all. I didn't know how to talk to her or anyone else, and she was inured not to. What an odd couple we made. I usually went to bed early, and tonight was no exception. The only difference this evening was that for the first time in my life, I wasn't sleeping alone. 10 minutes after the lights went out in all the rooms, Madison came into my room and lay in my bed. I was scared to death for many reasons. I wasn't a virgin, but the only girls I had ever been with were the ones I paid for. I lay perfectly still. I was afraid that if I moved or said anything, this beautiful moment would disappear. I hadn't really thought about the possibility of making love to Madison. I'm sure I'd consider it at some point, but I haven't yet. I guess she took my silence as an agreement to continue. For the next hour, I experienced the joy of free, liberated lovemaking. I wasn't doing anything at all but enjoying myself. Madison was skilled and adept at things I could never have imagined. All the impossible things I had seen on the internet were happening in my bed. It was over all too quickly. When I woke up in the morning, she was curled up with her head on my shoulder. I didn't want to move. I would have laid like that forever if I hadn't felt the need to go to the bathroom. She woke up when I moved and giggled at me as I headed for the bathroom. When I returned, she was gone. The coffee Madison was making tasted much better than mine. I decided that she was going to make it herself from now on. When I came out, she already had microwave pancakes and a 3-egg scramble on the table. When I came out, she smiled again. The eggs looked like they had suffered a little damage from the flipping, but only one of the rings was broken. By the end of the first week, things had calmed down. Madison and I had several discussions about what I expected of her. She was smart and a quick learner. Our relationship had sort of normalized. She seemed comfortable with me, and I was thrilled to have her around, especially since we started making love regularly. There were no more trips to Taco Bell or the Waffle House. I still had to eat lunch outside when I worked, but that didn't pose a problem. I asked Madison to cook myself something every day I was gone. The first month flew by quickly. My new pet was now cooking meals from scratch. Not all the time, but pretty regularly. She knew how to use the computer and wanted to surprise me with new recipes she discovered. Our grocery shopping trips were becoming a bit tedious for me, and I started making plans for her to get her driver's license so I wouldn't have to accompany her. Madison had never been to the dentist. After I finally figured out how to get her on my health plan at work, she started going to the dentist regularly. I still had to pay the bills, but I could use money from my Shopping for My Wife fund for that. She needed several $1,000s worth of dental services. Of course, checks from Mr. Franklin helped. 3 months later, she got her driver's license, and I was relieved of the obligation to go grocery shopping. I was over the moon. It couldn't have been better. And then the bomb dropped. "Bobby, I think I'm pregnant." "You know that for sure?" "Yeah. I've been pregnant before." "Do you have kids?" "No, I've had 2 abortions. Mr. Franklin doesn't allow children." "Mr. Franklin isn't here, but I am." "I know. Bobby, what do you want from me?" That was easy for me. "I want you to go to the doctor and find out what you need to do to have a healthy baby." I expected a smile, but not a hug. She almost knocked me over when she jumped on top of me. I think she was happier than I was. I also didn't expect the negative reaction I got after my first visit to the doctor. The examination clearly showed all the scars and bruises on Madison's body. Although none of them were fresh, the hospital staff felt it was their duty to contact the authorities. Then the authorities felt it was their duty to talk to me. I wasn't sure what to say. I decided it would be best if I didn't mention Maurice Franklin at all. I simply told them that she had been in an abusive relationship before we met her. The doctors confirmed that none of the bruises were fresh, which confirmed my statement. Madison pissed the hell out of them because she flatly refused to say anything. The situation was temporarily resolved when I agreed to bring her back to the hospital for regular visits, and the hospital agreed to report any new cases of abuse to the police. From then on, things seemed to go smoothly. Madison and I grew close. She never seemed to mind that I was large and unassuming. She started trimming my hair, and it looked a little less severe. I had to comb my hair a bit, but I didn't mind. The biggest change was my new beard. Every 3 days, she sat me down and carefully trimmed my beard, eyebrows, and ears. I thought only old people needed to trim their ears. Perhaps I was beginning to age. The beard sort of softened my facial features. My unattractive nose and mouth were hidden behind a neat mop of hair that covered my face. I also realized that I had begun to dress a little better. Her shopping trips included more than just grocery shopping. She seemed to enjoy buying me clothes. Since I could afford it, I didn't complain. A few months before the baby was born, we traveled to Maryland and got married. Morris never said we couldn't, and besides, he wasn't here. We had an adorable baby girl whom Madison named Roberta. My parents had moved to Florida years ago, but flew down to see the baby girl and meet their new daughter-in-law. My mother and father seemed amazed that I had caught the eye of such a wonderful girl and married her. I never explained the circumstances to them. Madison had no idea who her parents were, so we had no one to contact among her relatives. A few months later, we bought a house. It was a little bigger, a little nicer, and a little more expensive than renting. I got a nice raise at work that year, and that helped. We continued to get a monthly check from Mr. Franklin. One way or another, he recognized our new address. The next year, we had another daughter, Marcella. I was, of course, delighted that we had purchased a new home. My life was fulfilling and everything was perfect. I had a good job, a comfortable home, a beautiful wife, and 2 adorable daughters. What more could a man want? But time flew by too fast. Madison and I had completely forgotten about Maurice Franklin. Although we were reminded of him every month when the check came in, we were kind of removed from the reality of his existence until the phone rang. "Mr. Trent? It's Maurice Franklin." It was a shock. I knew he'd be back one day, but I kept thinking that maybe something would change. It didn't. "Yes, Mr. Franklin. It's good to hear from you." Of course, it was a lie, but I was trying to be polite. "Mr. Trent, it's time to settle this. I'm back in the district and temporarily staying at the Executive Hotel downtown. I'm staying in room 1202. I'll be expecting Topaz at 6 o'clock this evening. I want to tell you how much I appreciate the fact that you took care of her in my absence, and I'll add a little bonus to your next and final check." I didn't say anything. I couldn't get a word out of myself. I sat in silence. "Mr. Trent, can you hear me? Can you hear me?" "Yes, I heard you. Room 1202 at the Executive Hotel at 6 o'clock. I'll make sure she's there." Madison stood in the room and heard me finish the call. She stood looking at me and finally spoke. "What did he say, Bobby?" "He said it's time to make things right. I don't know what to do." "What do you want me to do?" "We don't have a choice. It's time to make things right. It has to be done." Madison looked at me, and I know she saw tears in my eyes. Grown men don't cry. I left the house and walked down the street. I didn't know where I was going, but I just felt like walking. 2 hours later, I came home. My wife was sitting on the couch, all dressed up. Roberta and Marcella were sitting comfortably in front of the TV. She stood up and looked at me without flinching. "I have to go now. You have to take care of the kids. Dinner's on the stove, just heat it up." After she left, I sat down on the couch and cried. The girls didn't notice anything. We ate dinner quietly. Roberta asked where her mom was, and I told her she had to go to a meeting. I had no idea how I would explain tomorrow why she didn't come back. It was a dream. A beautiful dream. I still had my girls, but Madison was gone forever. I had just put the girls to bed when I heard the front door open. It was Madison. She had come back. I burst into tears like a baby and rushed over to her and lifted her into my arms. "Easy, Bobby. Take it easy. You're gonna break my ribs." "I'm sorry. I'm so happy to see you. I was afraid we'd lost you forever." "Why? Why do you think that?" "I don't know. I think it's because of your relationship with Mr. Franklin. I felt like I didn't stand a chance." "Bobby, what was the last thing Maurice said to me before he left?" I thought for a moment before answering. "Mr. Trent is your new master. You will do whatever he asks of you without question. Do you understand me?" "What did you tell me to do tonight before I left?" "I told you it was time to make things right." "That's exactly what I did, Bobby. That's exactly what I did. Did the girls have dinner?" Yeah." "Good." Chuckles. "No more talking. Let's go to bed. I had a restless night." The next morning, Madison acted like everything was normal. I was at work when I found out what really happened. The news was on the TV in the break room. A man, identified as Maurice Franklin, was found murdered this morning in his downtown hotel room. He was tied to the bed with silk ties, and a plastic bag was placed over his head. Police were looking for a goth girl who was captured on CCTV cameras entering and leaving his room earlier in the evening. That evening, I brought home a dozen roses for my wife. We had burritos for dinner, not frozen. I'm going to miss those monthly checks, but I think we'll manage. The end.